Hey ho, howdy ho, y'all. Today, I'm going to be discussing and ranking the so far 6 games released by STUDIO INVESTIGRAVE. Eloquent Countenance, Cold Front, Elevator Hitch, Deadplate, Married in Red, and Rotten Paradise, all of which will be linked below. I highly recommend playing these games for yourself. They're all free and pretty short, and collectively average roughly 15 minutes. I do recommend going through all these games blind, but I will be putting a timestamp to skip the more spoilery bits in the comments below. STUDIO INVESTIGRAVE is an indie game studio that creates short indie horror visual novelesque games made up of the following 3 people. Rachel draws this, he/she, and Ekrix, he/him, on story, art, and development, and Belle Callinger in charge of music and sound design. I say all this because there's a tendency to credit the games solely to Rachel since it's her itch.io page where you can download it, but aside from the first 2 games, they all worked on them. Now then, in terms of the ranking, it was really tough to figure some of them out. I want to balance story quality with gameplay quality, but many of these have very little gameplay beyond walking in some small puzzles. It's also worth mentioning that as you go, the games get better optimized. I think that's the right term. I'm not a programmer. Effectively, as you go forward, the games run better. I assume this is a result of the team learning more about programming / their engine, etc. As far as judging the story goes, there is the obvious it makes sense parameter, but I also want to factor in emotional potency and how good it is as, well, a horror. Also, it's worth noting that most of these games were made for game jams. As such, probably didn't actually have that much time in development because game jam. Now, without further ado, let's begin, shall we?
Are your brains as soft as your ramen noodles, noodle boy?
The bottom 3 slots were the hardest, because I knew that between the ones that I thought to be weakest, it was all for completely different reasons. And ultimately, I'd say that my bottom placement would be Deadplate. Now, don't get me wrong, by no means is this a bad game. It just came down to one single thing. Polish. This game is the one that, by far, I experienced the most glitches with. For instance, infinite appetizer dead plates, infinite appetizer tickets, multiple instances of the select button not working regardless of my placement, as well as table hitboxes being very frustrating, not to mention that every time I thought I understood how the counter worked, it did something that didn't make sense. But despite that, I still had fun playing this game. The glitches were few and far between, and once I got used to the game's movement and its hitboxes, it was pretty easy to navigate. This game's 60s French aesthetic is quite stylish. I especially like the look of the magazine, and the music complements it perfectly. As well, the art is great, the sprites are really charming, I especially like Vince's look, especially in the kitchen scenes. Though, I must admit, Rhodey is my least favorite protag, both visually and personality-wise. The story, without spoilers, has some fun reveals that recontextualize the other endings occasionally, and I especially love the sound over the credits and ending for. I did not realize till watching someone else play through this that you can see Vince pull out his knife. Anyway, I do really like how ending 3 recontextualized ending 1 through the stake, and I feel like the horror of Deadplate comes more so from its brutality towards their main character than any amount of direct danger Rhodey's in. Seeing this horrific thing happen just because Vince was desperate to taste something, though I must admit that I don't fully get why he was bothering to make the stake in the first place. Like, in ending 1, he gets nothing out of doing that. I guess maybe he just has some amount of an obsession with Rhodey since he crossed out the negative statements about him in their review. Yeah, anyway. Just to end off on a more positive note, the text when you interact with the Deadplate in ending 3 is absolutely brutal. I recommend playing through this game while you're eating.
If you want to defeat Tedesco...
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
Eloquent Countenance was the first game. Without this one, this may never have happened. That said, it does fall on the weaker side. This game feels the slowest by far in terms of walking and text speed and just the feel of it. Also, having to walk to the back of the map to save can get annoying when trying to do the ending. But the story is where it's at. Our main character has a lot of fun dialogue options, to both take Forcus seriously and immensely sass him. That combined with Forks' own goofiness lends the game a strong amount of charm that doesn't take away from its horror elements. As for those horror elements, I think they're some of the best of InvestiGrave's work, especially in the bad ending, which I really like. The game achieves its horror outside of its endings through its ethereal atmosphere, combined with creepy imagery like the eyes. Ultimately, this game is as low as it is due to scale. The games above it have more fleshed out / interesting characters and concepts, as well as the art being more polished. I recommend playing this one with your choice of Holy Scripture on hand.
Body is 90% water, and this cloak does nothing!
Coldfront was an odd one to place. I considered placing it anywhere from 6 to 3. I think 4th is right, because I just barely put it over Eloquent Countenance, but just under number 3. Coldfront stands out as the most overtly emotional story of the lot, so I'm actually going to start with the main issue with the game's story as a whole is that it's really on the nose most of the time. Like, the characters blatantly assume the other's thoughts, and then remind the other that they're assuming. The monster is literally a combination of their favorite animals, and while none of that alone is enough to be a problem, when compounded with the others, it makes a troublesome thing to get past for me. The lack of subtlety, especially in the dialogue. The stair scene in the bad end is very good, though. I want to be clear that I don't think the game's story is by any means bad, just unsubtle. And it has some dialogue issues other than that. Like when we get an explanation and it just immediately summarizes it. Which I guess is another example of unsubtlety, but I feel it comes from a lack of trust in the audience's ability to understand what's happening without it being spoon-fed to them. But to be fair to it, it has some really solid horror moments, like the bodies in the street and the monster, which, whilst being a pretty mid-creature design, is really imposing and introduces some neat gore to the game. And the game has some really fun sprite works. I think it's the prettier of the 2.5D games. I think that Coldfront is a solid story told pretty well. I recommend playing it in a blanket.
Hey doctor, could you tell me what's wrong?
I feel I have an odd relationship with Married in Red. When it first came out, it was the game I was looking the most forward to playing. I played it, I liked it, and of these 6 games, it's the one I feel the least likely to replay. In no part is that because I think it's bad. It's all about scale with this one. It's a very short game, the only one with only one ending. It has a good personal stakes plot, interesting characters, and good music, as well as having far less of the supernatural elements from all the other games. The main interesting part to me is analyzing the characters of Dajong and Boksu. Apologies for my inaudible mispronunciations. And how they are both genuinely evil people. Dajong, through framing her close friend to cover up her mistake and hiding that from everyone she's ever known since, while refusing to admit that it was a morally wrong thing to do. And Boksu for, well, going about vengeance in this manner. Killing an innocent and traumatizing who knows how many people just to get back at Dajong. The characters are quite interesting. In addition, I like that this game takes place in Korea and that reflects on things other than just aesthetics like it does in most of the other games. Which, to be clear, is fine. I just appreciate it here. Also, shout out that dog. Incredibly based. I recommend playing this one with your spouse. Elevator Hitch is a very good game. While its characters are less defined main characters than the other games, it more than makes up for that in its amazing handle on everything else. First and foremost, those characters. While less deeply explored than a Vince or an Augustine, they have just as much, if not more, charm. The setting, aesthetically and practically interesting, fun to explore. The puzzles are very fun, and the many endings that come with them are really neat and caught me off guard when I first started. They provide some great visuals. The interview was really interesting to me. It had a lot of symbolism going on, but more than anything, it was seeing how the boss was characterized that fascinated me. When I was running back through to get the last few endings I'd missed, I went through the interview doing all the wrong answers, and after one of them, the boss just absolutely tears into our MC. It really made me think about what the game was trying to say. Because this game's story and message is the most indirect. It's very good and clear if you're paying attention, but where Rotten Paradise opens by telling you its theme, or Cold Front literally spells it out for you, this game never directly says it. The closest you get is the ending. My main real problem with this game, it really just comes in the form of the controls being a bit clunky at times. I recommend playing this game while planning the downfall of the capitalist society that we live in. Or while in your cubicle at the office. Okay, first things first. I have a few nitpicks. I don't like the button input you have to put in to use the map. And I wish there was more time with the group before things go off the rails. However, Rotten Paradise is the most interesting game of the lot to me. Its characters, themes, plot, all of them interesting. The art in this game is charming, yet so quickly turns uncanny when it needs to, in a way none of the other games quite manage. The atmosphere is so fun at first, but by the end it's absolutely dripping with entropy, helped further by the color palette slowly getting duller and duller. The characters are handled expert, through being incredibly fun to see the interactions with, and seeing the tangible changes that June sees. As for the plot and themes, I can't properly talk about them without getting spoilery, so from here I direct you to the way that there are two possible explanations of the ending depending on if you want to look at it from a metaphorical perspective versus an in-universe perspective. In-universe, some kind of cosmic horror, either living in or the ocean itself, is controlling people to make them sink into it, partially related to / caused by a collective delusion that a storm that's come is going to flood the island and consume them. In my head, I imagine this as something the ocean itself is causing in some way. The biggest point leading me to believe it's the ocean itself comes from the verbiage of she/her, a common way to talk about the ocean, and specifically Vaughn claiming that she needs to return the fish to her. The other main reading is the metaphor that the game is going for, that of a toxic friend group, an element hinted at very early in the game through some subtle dialogue, as well as bluntly hitting you with it in the form of the Bible quote at the start and the story of June's cousin. It is my belief that the actual explanation is a mix between the two, the ocean calling people to believe it's going to consume everything, leading to people eating metal and other such materials to make themselves sink, that for some reason doesn't affect Ryan and most of all June, the ways they're affected reflecting their most toxic traits. It affects McCoy by making him ominously stare out at the sea while saying, "She is coming." I believe this is because McCoy is the most cowardly of the lot, perhaps even having the least will as well. The main reason I think this is because, despite being the closest one to the water, June manages to catch him before he's sunk. His toxicity is also demonstrated via him just generally being an asshole to June in ways she clearly doesn't take well, as well as claiming that he doesn't like violence, but his instinct upon seeing June is to attack her. Secondly, Vaughn, I don't quite feel qualified to examine heavily. Like, she's clearly a hater, best demonstrated by her apparent bad treatment of minimum wage workers, but that seems to be a defense mechanism, just like the others. The main way that the collective delusion affects her is eating all the seafood in the buffet despite being allergic so she can return the fish, maybe implying an ED, but that's what I don't feel qualified about. On a somewhat lighter note, Carmen's worst traits are subtler at first, seen in her situation before the trip. It manifests as her lying still in water, and pushing the people who try to help her away. She's incredibly defensive, putting up walls around her and attacking people to make them leave her alone. The final friend is Ryan, who I don't think is properly toxic like the others. We know that when he's threatened, his instinct was to isolate himself. He also doesn't stand up for himself, as June says. That's why he also goes at the end. He goes in last because he can be easily peer pressured. Literally, if all your friends are doing it. Which I believe, based on what Carmen says about him, comes from a fear of being truly alone. There's a lot more I could say, but a lot of it is conjecture, with far less tangible proof. Maybe I'll make a video about that someday, but for now that's it. To summarize, for y'all spoiler-frees, the game provides an amazingly done metaphor that is hinted at throughout, while also being a very good cosmic horror story. And like a good cosmic horror story, there is no neat explanation that explains everything. And those endings left me wanting more in the best way. I recommend playing this game during a flood. So yeah, that's InvestiGrave. I look massively forward to seeing what happens in their future games and other projects. For more stuff from the team members, check out their links in the description. For some specific recommendations, on Rix's YouTube channel, there's an original short film called Dead Fish, and while I haven't listened to them yet, Bell & Callinger has some other albums aside from these soundtracks. So, if you like music in these games, which I've been using as background music throughout this video, please check them out. If you've gotten this far and still haven't played any of them, check them out. They're free, and the more people know about these games, the more these talented devs can make. Also, I didn't learn this until after starting working on this video, but they have another game scheduled to come out this summer. So, look forward to that. Keep an eye on them. See y'all in the next one. Take your meds.